The massive crystal doors of the Galactic Council chambers slid open with a sound like breaking glass. Ambassador Jinwoo walked through them slowly, his black diplomatic suit looking plain and simple next to the glowing robes and energy forms of the other species around him. He carried a single data pad in his hands. Nothing more. The other ambassadors barely looked at him as he made his way to the speaking platform in the center of the great hall above him. The dome-shaped ceiling showed the stars of the galaxy spinning slowly. Thousands of worlds were represented here, each one ruled by species that had traveled between stars for millions of years. The humans had been in space for only 300 years. Everyone knew this. Everyone remembered this. Jinwoo stepped onto the platform and cleared his throat. The sound echoed in the vast chamber, but the conversations around him did not stop. The tall, crystal-like Vorthok continued their clicking discussions. The insect-like Quillen kept buzzing to each other in their hive clusters. The energy beings called Nexari flickered and pulsed as they shared thoughts at the speed of light. "Honored members of the council," Jinwoo began, his voice steady despite the lack of attention. "I come before you today to request full membership status for the human species in the Galactic Council." Few heads turned toward him. Most did not. This was the third time in 50 years that humanity had made this request. The first 2 times had been rejected without much discussion. Council. Prime Vexithora of the Vorthok finally looked down at Jinwoo. Her crystal body caught the light from the dome above and threw rainbow patterns across the walls. When she spoke, her voice sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze, but her words were cold. "Ambassador Jinwoo," she said, "your species has been granted associate membership. You have trading rights. You have protection under galactic law. What more do you believe you deserve?" Jinwoo had prepared for this question. He'd spent months studying the Council's own rules and requirements. "Honored Prime," he replied, "humanity has fulfilled all requirements for full membership. We have maintained peaceful relations with all Council species for 200 years. We have contributed to galactic defense forces. We have shared our scientific discoveries freely. We have followed all Council laws and regulations." Sound like laughter came from the Quillen section. Ambassador Krelthin, whose insect-like body was covered in shimmering green chitin, stepped forward. "Contributed to galactic defense," he repeated, his voice making a clicking sound with each word. "Yes, we have seen your contribution. Border patrol in the Outer Rim, protecting empty space from pirates who are too poor to have real weapons." More laughter came from around the chamber. Jinwoo felt heat rise in his cheeks, but kept his expression calm. He had been warned this would happen. "The Outer Rim territories are an important part of Council space," he said. "Human forces have successfully maintained peace and security in that region for over a century." "Peace and security," chimed in Nexari Prime Zalthine, whose energy form pulsed with what might have been amusement. "In a region so worthless that even pirates avoid it. How impressive." Vexera raised one crystal hand and the chamber fell. "Quiet, Ambassador Jinwoo," she said. "Let me explain something to you. Full membership in this council is not given lightly. It requires more than simply following rules. It requires strength. It requires the ability to protect not just your own worlds, but the worlds of others. It requires technology and wisdom that can benefit all of galactic civilization." She gestured toward the dome above them. "The Vorthok had been spacefaring for 12 million years. We have perfected crystal technology that can store the energy of entire stars. The Quillen have mastered biological engineering that can adapt to any environment in the galaxy. The Nexari exist as pure energy and can travel faster than light itself. These are the achievements of full council members." Jinwoo nodded. "And what of human achievements, Honored Prime?" "Human achievements," Vexthera repeated, and her voice carried a tone that made several other ambassadors chuckle. "You have learned to copy our technology reasonably well. Your ships are adequate for basic transportation. Your weapons are sufficient for dealing with minor threats. Your science has advanced to the point where you understand perhaps 1% of what we know about the universe." She paused, letting her words sink in. "These are not the achievements of a species ready for full membership. These are the achievements of a species that has barely begun to crawl among the stars." Ginwu felt the weight of every eye in the chamber on him. He had known this meeting would be difficult, but hearing humanity dismissed so casually still stung. He thought of the message he had received from Admiral Hyjin before leaving Earth. Her words had been simple. Tell them what they expect. To hear, let them think what they want to think. I understand your concerns, Jinwu said carefully. Perhaps humanity is not yet ready for full membership. We will continue to serve the Council in whatever capacity we can. Wise words, Vexera replied. Continue your border patrol duties. Learn from your betters. Care. In perhaps another 1,000 years, when your species has matured, you may request membership again. The dismissal was clear. Jinwu bowed formally and turned to leave. As he walked back toward the crystal doors, he heard the conversations resume behind him. The Vorthok were discussing trade agreements that would make them richer. The Quillen were planning expansion into new territories. The Nexari were sharing discoveries that would advance their already incredible technology. None of them were talking about the humans. They had already forgotten about Jinwu and his request. As the doors closed behind him, Jinwu activated his personal communicator. The message was brief and coded, but Admiral Hyjin would understand its meaning. Mission accomplished. They suspect nothing. On the far side of the galaxy, in the outer rim territories that the Council considered so worthless, something very different was happening. Captain Dongmin stood on the bridge of his patrol ship, watching as massive structures moved in the darkness between stars. They were so large that they blocked out entire star fields, yet they made no sound and gave off no energy signatures that alien sensors could detect. Status report, Dongmin said quietly.
Ow.
Construction platforms are operational, replied his tactical officer. The Quillen long-range scouts passed through this sector yesterday. They detected nothing. Dongmin nodded. The aliens were looking for ships and weapons they could understand. They were not looking for what humanity had actually built. And the fleet status? 75% of all units are now in position. The remaining 25% will be ready within the month. Dongmin allowed himself a small smile. The Galactic Council thought humanity had a few hundred patrol ships scattered across the outer rim. They had no idea that those patrol ships were just the tiny visible tip of something much larger. Any word from Earth Command? Yes, sir. Admiral. Hyjin sends her compliments. The council meeting went exactly as planned. Ambassador Jinwu played his part perfectly. Dongmin looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the aliens were congratulating themselves on putting humanity in its place. They were comfortable in their superiority, secure in their ancient power, certain that the young human species posed no threat to their control of the galaxy. They were about to learn how wrong they could be. The communication. Console chimed softly. A new message had arrived, encrypted with codes that no alien species had ever seen. Dongmin read it carefully, then looked up at his crew. Prepare for Phase 2, he said. It's time to show them what we've really been doing out here. In the depths of space, in the darkness between the stars, humanity's true fleet began to stir. And in the council chambers on the other side of the galaxy, the aliens continued their discussions, completely unaware that they had just made the greatest mistake in galactic history. Story description. This opening section establishes the classic HFY setup where humanity appears weak and primitive to the arrogant galactic powers. The aliens dismiss human achievements and assign them to worthless border patrol duties, not realizing that humanity has been using this isolation to build something unprecedented. The tension builds through the contrast between the councils, dismissive attitude, and the hints that humanity is far more prepared than anyone realizes. The stage is set for the revelation that will shock the galaxy. 3 weeks after the council meeting, Admiral Krelthin of the Quillen hegemony stood in his war room, studying the holographic star map that floated above the central table. His insect-like eyes focused on a cluster of systems in the outer rim, all marked with the simple symbol that represented human territory. These worlds, he said to his gathered officers, have been wasted on an inferior species for too long. The other Quillen in the room buzzed their agreement. Their species had been expanding across the galaxy for millions of years, and they had grown tired of asking permission from the Council for every new conquest. The humans were weak, isolated, and had no powerful allies. It would be easy too. "Remove. The Council will object," said Commander Velthan. Her antennae twitching with concern, Krelthin made a sound that was the Quillen equivalent of laughter. "The Council gave us permission to expand into unclaimed territories. Once we control these worlds, we will simply declare them to be rightfully ours. The other species will not risk war over a few primitive human colonies." He was right, and everyone in the room knew it. The humans had no powerful friends in the galaxy. The Vorthok saw them as useful servants. The Nixari barely acknowledged their existence. The smaller species feared to anger the Quillen by supporting humanity. "Begin with the outer colonies," Krelthin ordered. "Take them quickly and quietly. Humans will surrender rather than fight a war they cannot win." The Quillen fleet moved swiftly through hyperspace, their bioships pulsing with organic energy. They had perfected the art of conquest over millions of years. Their ships could adapt to any enemy weapon. Their soldiers could survive in any environment. And their technology could overwhelm any defense. The first target was Sejung 7, a human mining colony on the edge of their territory. According to Quillen intelligence, it housed nearly 1 million humans and was defended by a small patrol fleet. It should fall within hours, but when the Quillen ships dropped out of hyperspace, they found something unexpected. The space around Sejong 7 was completely empty. No ships, no stations, no defensive platforms. Even the planet itself seemed deserted. "Scan for life signs," Krelthin ordered. The biosensors worked for several minutes, sending waves of energy through the system. When they finished, the results were puzzling. There were no humans anywhere in the system. The planet showed signs of recent habitation, but it was as if the entire population had simply vanished. "They fled," announced Commander Velthan. "The cowards abandoned their world rather than face us." Krelthin nodded slowly. It made sense. The humans had probably detected the Quillen fleet approaching and evacuated in panic. It was actually better this way. They could claim the world without having to fight for it. "Secure the planet," he ordered. "Begin colonization procedures immediately." But as the Quillen ships moved towards Sejong 7, something watched them from the darkness. Captain Yuri sat in the command chair of the stealth ship Invisible Phoenix, studying the alien fleet through sensors that the Quillen could not detect. Her ship was not simply cloaked, it existed in a folded pocket of spacetime. It made it invisible to all known forms of detection. "They're taking the bait," she reported quietly into her communicator, light years away. On Earth, the message was received in a bunker deep beneath the planet's surface. President Sujin read the report with satisfaction. The Quillen were acting exactly as humanity had hoped they would. "Activate the emergency protocols," she ordered. "All civilian populations are to be evacuated to the safe zones immediately. Military personnel are to report to their designated positions." Across human space, a transformation began. On worlds that appeared to be defenseless mining colonies and farming settlements, massive doors opened in the ground. Structures that had been disguised as industrial facilities revealed their true purpose. The humans had not been building a civilization in the Outer Rim. They had been building a fortress. Admiral Hijin stood in the command center of Sanctuary Station, a base so well hidden that it did not appear on any map. Of officers worked at control stations, coordinating the movement of ships and personnel across dozens of star systems. "Status report," she said. "All civilian evacuations are complete," reported her aide. "The Quillen have occupied 7 of our outer colonies. They believe they have achieved total victory." Hyjin smiled grimly. The Quillen had no idea what they had really captured. Those colonies had been built to be abandoned. Every building, every piece of equipment, every scrap of technology had been designed to tell a story, the story of a weak, frightened species that had fled rather than fight. And our fleet status. All units are in position and ready for operation. The Quillen have no idea we're here. Hyjin walked to the main display screen, which showed the positions of both fleets. The Quillen ships were scattered across human territory, confident in their superiority. They had no idea that they were surrounded by forces they could not see or detect. "Begin Phase 2, she ordered. Send the message to all units. Operation Revelation is now active. In the darkness between stars, humanity's true fleet began to move. These were not the simple patrol ships that the aliens had seen. These were weapons of war beyond anything the galaxy had ever imagined. Ships that could fold space and time, weapons that could rewrite the laws of physics, and soldiers who had been trained for this moment their entire lives. Fleet Admiral Tejo received the order aboard his flagship, the Eternal Storm. The massive vessel had been hiding in the shadow of a gas giant for months, waiting for this moment. Around him, hundreds of similar ships began to power up their systems. All ships, this is Admiral Tejo, he announced, across the fleet communication system. For 200 years we have prepared for this day. The aliens think they know what humanity is capable of. Today, we show them the truth. The response was immediate. Across the fleet, thousands of voices replied with the same words: for Earth, for humanity, for the future. On Sejong 7, the Quillen colonists were busy setting up their new settlements when their sensors detected something impossible. Ships were appearing in space around the planet, not dropping out of hyperspace, but materializing from nowhere. The Quillen had never seen anything like it. Admiral Krelthon stared at his tactical display in confusion. According to his sensors, there were now hundreds of human ships surrounding his fleet. But that was impossible. The humans only had a few dozen patrol vessels in their entire navy. Analysis, he demanded. Unknown, sir, replied his tactical officer. These ships do not match any known human designs. Their energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases. Krelthon felt a chill run through his exoskeleton. Something was very wrong here. The humans were supposed to be weak and primitive. They were supposed to run away from superior force, not appear with fleets that his sensors could barely detect. Send a message to the human ships, he ordered. Tell them to surrender immediately or face the consequences. The response came back within minutes. It was a simple message, broadcast on all frequencies so that every ship in both fleets could hear it clearly. This is Admiral Hyjin of the Terran Defense Force, the voice said calmly. You have entered human space without permission. You have occupied human worlds without authorization. You have exactly 1 hour to withdraw all forces from human territory. If you do not comply, we will remove you by force. Krelthon could not believe what he was hearing. The humans were giving him an ultimatum. They were threatening the mighty Quillen hegemony. It was beyond absurd. Prepare for battle, he ordered. These primitives need to learn their place in the galaxy. But as the Quillen ships moved into attack formation, something happened that changed everything. The human ships did not move to meet them. Instead, they simply vanished. One moment they were there, the next they were gone, as if they had never existed. Where did they go? Krelthon demanded. Unknown, sir. All contacts have disappeared from our sensors. Krelthon stared at the empty space where the human fleet had been. This was impossible. Ships could not simply disappear. There had to be some explanation. He was about to find out that humanity had been preparing for this moment for 2 centuries. And the explanation was going to terrify him. Story description. This section shows the Quillens overconfident, attack on human territory, believing they're fighting a weak enemy. The humans have evacuated their colonies and are revealed to be using them as bait in a larger strategy. The true scope of human preparation becomes clear as hidden bases and advanced fleets are revealed. The tension builds as Admiral Hyjin activates Operation Revelation, and the human fleet demonstrates impossible technology by appearing and disappearing at will. The Quillen's confusion and growing fear sets up the devastating revelation to come. The hour passed slowly for Admiral Krelthon. He had used the time to spread his fleet across 3 star systems, positioning his ships to defend the colonies they had claimed. The Quillen bioships pulsed with readiness, their living hulls adapting to prepare for battle. Every warrior was confident that their superior technology would crush whatever pathetic resistance the humans might offer. When the deadline arrived, nothing happened. The space around the Quillen fleet remained empty and silent. Krelthon began to think that the humans had been bluffing, trying to scare him into retreat with empty threats. Sir called his sensor operator. I'm detecting some kind of energy buildup in the system. Krelthin looked at his displays, but they showed nothing unusual. Where? I'm not sure, sir. Readings are coming from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Before Krelthin could respond, reality itself seemed to tear open around his fleet. The space between stars began to fold and twist, creating impossible geometries that hurt to look at. And from these tears in the fabric of space-time, the human fleet emerged. But these were not the simple patrol ships the Quillen had expected. These vessels were massive, sleek, and covered in armor that seemed to bend light around it. They moved with impossible grace, defying every law of physics that the Quillen understood. Worst of all, there were thousands of them. Possible, Krelthin whispered. Captain Minho stood on the bridge of his dreadnought, the Eternal Storm. The ship was over 2 kilometers long and packed with weapons that the Quillen had never seen before. Around him, his crew worked calmly at their stations, as if materializing from folded space-time was something they did every day. All weapon systems are online, reported his tactical officer. Quantum disruptors are charged and ready. Minho nodded and opened a channel to the Quillen fleet. This is Captain Minho of the Terran Defense Force. You were given 1 hour to withdraw from human space. That time has expired. Krelthin recovered from his shock quickly. The humans might have some kind of new technology, but the Quillen had been fighting wars for millions of years. Numbers meant nothing if the ships were weak. All ships, attack formation, he ordered. Destroy these human vessels. The Quillen bioships moved forward, their organic hulls shifting and changing as they prepared for battle. Their adaptive armor would protect them from any weapon the humans might have, while their biocannons would tear through human defenses like paper. Commander Yunji watched the enemy fleet approach from the bridge of her destroyer, the Silent Thunder. She had been waiting for this moment her entire career. The Quillen were about to learn that humanity had not spent 2 centuries building conventional weapons. Fire when ready, she said calmly. The human ships opened fire, and the Quillen learned what true terror meant. The weapons that struck them were not energy beams or projectiles. They were something far worse, devices that reached into the heart of matter itself and rewrote the fundamental forces that held atoms together. The first Quillen ship simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, the next it was gone, converted into pure energy that lit up the darkness of space. The second ship tried to adapt its armor to defend against the attack, but the human weapons ignored armor entirely. They attacked the ship at the quantum level where no defense was possible. Evasive maneuvers. Krelthin screamed, but his ships were already dying. The human vessels moved through space like dancers, their weapons reaching across impossible distances to strike targets that should have been safe. Captain Minho watched the battle with professional interest. The Quillen ships were well built and their crews were skilled, but they were fighting with technology that was millions of years out of date. Humanity had spent 2 centuries developing weapons specifically designed to counter every known form of alien defense. Sir called his navigation officer. Enemy reinforcements are approaching from the Vex system. Minho smiled. The Quillen were calling for help just as humanity had hoped they would. Signaled the fleet. Prepare for full deployment. Across human space, the true scale of humanity's preparation became clear. From hidden bases scattered throughout the Outer Rim, more ships emerged. These were not just warships, but entire mobile cities, factory ships that could build new vessels in the middle of battle, and command centers that coordinated the movement of forces across dozens of star systems. Admiral Hygiene stood in the command center of her flagship, watching as reports poured in from across the battle zone. The Quillen fleet was in complete disarray, their ships scattered and burning, but this was only the beginning. Status of the quantum communication network? She asked. All nodes are active and functioning, replied her communications officer. We have instantaneous contact with every ship in the fleet. This was perhaps humanity's greatest secret. While the aliens still used conventional faster-than-light communication, which took time to travel between stars, humanity had developed quantum entanglement networks that allowed instant communication across any distance. Their ships moved as one mind, coordinating attacks and defenses with perfect timing. The Quillen reinforcements arrived to find a nightmare waiting for them. The space around the human colonies was filled with debris from their advance fleet, and the human ships were waiting in perfect formation. But what shocked them most was the sheer number of vessels they faced. "How many ships do they have?" demanded Admiral Velthan, who had taken command after Krelthan's flagship was destroyed. "Sensors indicate at least 3,000 vessels," replied her tactical officer. "But the readings are unstable. Some ships appear to be existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously." Velthan stared at the impossible readings. The humans were supposed to have a few hundred patrol ships at most. Where had this vast fleet come from? The answer was simple, though the Quillen would never understand it. For 2 centuries, humanity had been building in secret. Every mining colony had been a cover for ship construction. Every trading post had been a supply depot. Every peaceful research station had been a weapons development facility. While the aliens had grown comfortable with their ancient technologies, humanity had been driven by fear and paranoia to push the boundaries of what was possible. They had turned their greatest weakness, being alone and surrounded by potential enemies, to their greatest strength. Captain Ura's stealth ship, the Invisible Phoenix, moved through the battle like a ghost. Her vessel could phase through solid matter, making it impossible to target with conventional weapons. She watched as human forces demonstrated technologies that seemed more like magic than science. Ships that could manipulate gravity to crush enemy vessels. Weapons that could create miniature black holes. Soldiers in power armor that made them faster and stronger than any alien warrior. The humans had not just caught up to galactic civilization, they had surpassed it entirely. "Sir," called her weapons officer, "we're detecting emergency transmissions from the Quillen fleet. They're requesting immediate assistance from the Galactic Council." Yuri smiled grimly. Quillen were finally beginning to understand what they had awakened, but it was too late. The human fleet was already moving to their next target, and nothing in the galaxy could stop them now. The battle for Sajung 7 lasted less than 6 hours. When it was over, the mighty Quillen hegemony had lost over half of their fleet, and the survivors were fleeing in panic toward the core worlds. But the most terrifying part was not the defeat itself. It was the realization that the humans had been holding back. Admiral Higine's final message to the retreating Quillen was simple. "You wanted to see what humanity was capable of. This was just a demonstration. Do not make us show you what we can really do." The news of the battle spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The species that had dismissed humanity as primitive and weak were about to learn that they had made the greatest mistake in galactic history. Story. Description. This section delivers the explosive revelation of humanity's true military capabilities. The Quillen fleet faces impossible human technology that defies known physics, ships that fold space-time, weapons that attack at the quantum level, and perfect coordination through instantaneous communication networks. The scale of human preparation is revealed as thousands of hidden ships emerge from secret bases. The aliens' overconfidence turns to terror as they realize they're fighting a species that has secretly surpassed all galactic civilizations. The battle ends with humanity's crushing victory and a chilling warning that this was only a demonstration of their true power. The silence that followed the Battle of Kepler Nebula was unlike anything the galaxy had ever experienced. For 12 million years, the communication networks that connected thousands of worlds had buzzed with constant chatter. Trade negotiations, diplomatic discussions, scientific exchanges, and casual conversations between species had created a background hum of galactic civilization. Now, that hum was gone. On Vorthok Prime, the crystal cities that had stood for millions of years dimmed their lights for the first time in recorded history. Council Prime Vexthera sat in her private chamber, staring at reports that made no sense. The combined fleet of the galaxy's greatest powers had been destroyed by a species that was supposed to be primitive. Worse, the humans had done it with such ease that it seemed almost casual. "How many survivors?" she asked her aide.
Less than
800 ships out of 10,000, came the reply. "Most are badly damaged and barely functional." Vexthera closed her eyes. 800 survivors from the greatest military force ever assembled. The humans had not just won a battle. they had demonstrated that the entire galactic order was built on an illusion. And the human casualties unknown? Our survivors report that they saw several human ships take damage, but none were confirmed destroyed. The implications were staggering. Humanity had faced down the combined might of galactic civilization and emerged virtually unscathed. They had not just won, they had proven that they could have won even more decisively if they had chosen to. Ambassador Jinwoo walked through the corridors of the Galactic Council station. But now his experience was very different from his previous visit. Alien representatives who had once ignored him now stepped aside when they saw him coming. Guards who had barely acknowledged his presence now saluted respectfully. The human who had been dismissed as a representative of a primitive species was now feared as the voice of the galaxy's most dangerous power. But Jinwoo felt no satisfaction in their fear. He had not wanted this. Humanity had not wanted this. They had simply wanted to be left alone to build their own civilization in the Outer Rim. It was the galaxy's arrogance and aggression that had forced them to reveal their true capabilities. The emergency session was smaller than the last one. Many species had recalled their ambassadors, afraid that association with the Council might draw human attention to their worlds. Those who remained spoke in whispers, as if afraid that talking too loudly might somehow summon the terrible human fleet. Ambassador Jinwoo, Vexthera, said as he entered the chamber. Her voice, once filled with condescension, now carried a note of genuine respect tinged with fear. We need to discuss terms. Jinwoo took his place at the speaking platform, but this time every eye in the chamber was focused on him. What terms would those be, Council Prime? Terms for peace, she replied quickly. Terms for coexistence. Surely we can find a way to share the galaxy without further conflict. Jinwoo studied the assembled representatives. A few weeks ago, these same beings had laughed at humanity's request for basic membership. They had assigned humans to worthless border patrol duties and dismissed their achievements as insignificant. Now they were begging for peace. Peace? Jinwoo repeated thoughtfully. An interesting concept. Tell me, Council Prime, what do you think peace means? It means we acknowledge human sovereignty over your claimed territories. We recognize your right to exist and expand as you see fit. We offer full council membership with all privileges and rights. Full membership, Jinwoo said. The same membership you denied us 3 times because we were not worthy. The same membership you said we might be ready for in another 1,000 years. The chamber fell silent. Everyone understood the implicit threat in his words. On Earth, President Sujin reviewed the reports from across human space. The revelation of their true military capabilities had changed everything. Alien trading ships that had once traveled freely through human territory now requested permission before entering each system. Diplomatic messages arrived daily from species that had never acknowledged humanity's existence, all seeking to establish friendly relations. Status of the integration protocols? She asked her cabinet. All former council territories in the Outer Rim have voted to join the Terran hegemony, reported her foreign minister. They're requesting human protection and technology in exchange. For loyalty, Sujin nodded. It was exactly what they had predicted. Fear was a powerful motivator, and the smaller species had quickly realized that. Alignment with humanity was their best chance for survival in the new galactic order, and the major powers, the Vorthok and Nexari, are maintaining radio silence. The surviving Quillan forces have retreated to their core systems. Intelligence suggests they're fortifying their worlds and preparing for siege. They think we're coming for them, Sujin said quietly. Are we? Sujin looked out the window. At the blue sky of Earth, somewhere out there, Admiral Hyjin was commanding fleets that could reshape the galaxy with a word. Humanity had the power to conquer every world, enslave every species, and rule as absolute dictators over all of known space. The question was whether they should. Send a message to all human forces, she decided. Full defensive posture only. We do not attack unless attacked. We are not conquerors. Admiral Hyjin received the order aboard her flagship as it patrolled the edge of human space. Around her, The fleet that had terrorized the galaxy waited for her commands. Ships that could fold space and time, weapons that could rewrite reality itself, and soldiers who had proven themselves superior to any force the aliens could muster. Ma'am, called her communications officer. We're receiving a transmission from the Nexari Collective. They're requesting a meeting to discuss territorial boundaries. Jin almost smiled. The energy beings who had once ignored humanity entirely now wanted to negotiate borders. They were afraid that the humans might decide their territory was more useful than their friendship. Tell them we'll consider their request, she replied. But make it clear that we're not interested in their territory. We have everything we need. It was true. The Outer Rim territories that the aliens had considered worthless were actually perfect for humanity's needs. Rich in resources, strategically positioned, and far enough from the galactic core to provide security. The humans had never wanted to rule the galaxy. They had only wanted to be left alone to build their own destiny. Captain Dongman stood on the bridge of his fortress ship, watching as the last of the civilian populations returned to their homes. The evacuation had been temporary, designed to make the aliens think they had won an easy victory. Now the colonies were being rebuilt, but this time with no attempt to hide their true nature. Massive defensive platforms surrounded every world. Shipyards operated openly in the light of local stars, and everywhere the blue and silver flag of the Terran hegemony flew proudly, marking these worlds as under human protection. Sir, reported his tactical officer, long-range sensors are detecting alien scout ships at the edge of the system. They're maintaining a respectful distance. Dongman nodded. The aliens were watching, trying to understand how humanity had hidden such massive infrastructure for so long. They were learning that humans were very good at keeping secrets when they needed to. Let them watch, he said. Let them see what we've built. Let them understand that this is what happens when you underestimate Earth's children. Back in the council chambers, Ambassador Jin Woo delivered humanity's terms for peace. They were simple and non-negotiable. The Galactic Council would recognize human sovereignty over all claimed territories. They would provide full reparations for the unprovoked attack on human colonies. They would grant humanity permanent membership with full voting rights. And most importantly, they would never again threaten human worlds or citizens. And if we refuse? Asked Vexera, though her voice suggested she already knew the answer. Jinwoo's expression remained calm, but his words carried the weight of the entire human fleet behind them. Then you will discover what our military is truly capable of. When we stop holding back, the vote was unanimous. For the first time in galactic history, a species had not joined the Council by invitation or application. They had joined by conquest, by proving that they were too dangerous to exclude and too powerful to oppose. The galaxy that had once dismissed humanity as primitive and weak now trembled at the sound of their name. And in the silence that followed, their victory. A new age began, an age where Earth's children would never again be underestimated. Story description: this section shows the aftermath of humanity's devastating victory. As the galaxy falls into stunned silence, the once arrogant aliens now fear and respect human power. With Jinwoo returning to the Council as a figure of terror rather than a supplicant, humanity's restraint is revealed as President Sujin chooses not to conquer despite having the power. To do so, the smaller species align with the Terran hegemony for protection, while the major powers retreat in fear. The irony is complete. Humanity gains everything they originally asked for, not through diplomacy but through proving they could destroy anyone who opposed them. The galaxy's power structure is permanently changed, with humanity as the new apex predator. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike anything in the organization's 12-million-year history. Representatives from every major species had gathered within hours of receiving the reports from the Outer Rim. The Great Chamber, that had once echoed with comfortable discussions about trade and territory, now buzzed with fear and confusion. Council Prime Vexthara stood before the assembled delegates, her crystal form flickering with nervous energy. The holographic display behind her showed the aftermath of the battle at Sejong 7. Debris fields where proud Quillen bioships had once been. Energy readings that made no sense. And most disturbing of all, images of human vessels that seemed to defy every law of physics. "The reports have been verified," she announced, her voice no longer carrying its usual arrogance. "The Quillen Third Fleet has been destroyed. Over 1,500 ships lost in less than 6 hours?" A shocked silence filled the chamber. The Quillen Third Fleet had been one of the most powerful military forces in the galaxy. For it to be wiped out so quickly was unthinkable. Ambassador Zelthara of the Nexari flickered with disbelief. "This must be some kind of mistake. The humans have barely 200 ships in their entire fleet." "That is what we believed," Vexara replied grimly. "We were wrong." She activated another display, showing the tactical recordings from the battle. The assembled delegates watched in growing horror as human ships materialized from nowhere, fired weapons that turned matter into energy, and moved through space with impossible coordination. "How is this possible?" demanded Representative Kickstar of the smaller unified worlds. "The humans are primitives. We've seen their technology. It's centuries behind ours." "Apparently," said Vexthera, "we have only seen what they wanted us to." "See, in the Vorthok sector, Admiral Rexthon paced his command chamber like a caged predator. His crystal body sparked with barely contained anger as he studied the battle reports. The Vorthok had ruled the galaxy for millions of years through superior technology and careful planning. They did not lose to upstart species that had barely learned to travel between stars. "Summon the War Council," he ordered. "We will show these humans what happens when they challenge their betters." Within days, the largest military fleet in galactic history began to assemble. The Vorthok brought their crystal dreadnoughts, ships that could channel the power of entire stars. The Nexari contributed their energy vessels, beings of pure light that could travel faster than anything else in the galaxy. Dozens of smaller species added their forces, creating an armada of over 10,000 ships. General Wu Jin received the intelligence reports in his command, bunkered deep beneath Earth's surface. At 28, he was the youngest general in human history. Promoted not because of politics, but because of his brilliant tactical mind. The approaching alien fleet was exactly what humanity had been preparing for. They're doing exactly what we predicted, he told Admiral Hyjin over the quantum communication link. "Pride and fear are making them act without thinking." "How long until they reach our territory?" Hyjin asked. 2 weeks at their current speed. They're taking time to coordinate their forces, which gives us the advantage. Wu Jin activated the strategic display that showed the entire galaxy. Red markers indicated the approaching alien fleet, while blue dots showed human positions. To any observer, it would look like humanity was vastly outnumbered, but the blue dots were only the visible ships. "Activate Protocol 7, he ordered. "All hidden assets are now authorized for deployment." Across human space, the true extent of their preparation revealed itself. Asteroid mining facilities opened to reveal massive shipyards. Space stations that had appeared to be simple research posts deployed weapons platforms the size of small moons. And from the empty void between stars, ships began to emerge by the 2000s. Captain Hyansu stood on the bridge of his battlecruiser, Iron Will, as it powered up for the first time in 50 years. The ship had been built in secret, hidden in a hollowed-out asteroid while alien traders passed by just kilometers away. Now, it and hundreds like it were ready to show their true purpose. "All systems green," reported his engineering officer. "The new armor plating is functioning perfectly." The armor was another of humanity's secrets. While alien species had developed energy shields and adaptive defenses, humans had created something different. Their ships were covered in a material that could phase between dimensions, making them nearly impossible to target with conventional weapons. "Sir," called his communications officer, "we're receiving the deployment orders from Earth Command." Hyansu read the orders with satisfaction. The alien fleet was approaching the Kepler Nebula, a region of space filled with gas clouds and stellar debris. It was the perfect place for an ambush, and humanity had been preparing that ambush for decades. The alien armada moved through space with confidence. 10,000 ships from dozens of species, all united in their determination to crush. "The upstart humans?" Admiral Rexton commanded from his flagship. A crystal dreadnought 3 kilometers long and packed with weapons that could crack planets. The humans cannot possibly stand against this force, he told his assembled commanders. We will sweep through their territory like a cleansing fire. But as the fleet entered the Kepler Nebula, strange things began to happen. Ships started reporting sensor malfunctions. Navigation systems gave impossible readings. And slowly, crews began to realize that they were not alone in the gas clouds. Commander G1 piloted her aerospace fighter through the nebula with practiced ease. Her ship was small and fast, designed for hit-and-run attacks against much larger vessels. But it was also equipped with technology that the aliens had never seen before. All squadrons, this is Phoenix Leader, she broadcast to her wing. Begin the dance. The human fighters began their attack, but not in any way the aliens expected. Instead of flying straight at their targets, they seemed to flicker in and out of existence. One moment a fighter would be on the alien sensors, the next it would be gone, only to reappear behind an enemy ship and unleash devastating weapons fire. What are they doing? Demanded Rexthon, as his tactical display filled with impossible readings. Sir, the human fighters appear to be phasing through our shields, reported his tactical officer. Our weapons cannot lock onto them. Rexthon watched in growing alarm as his mighty fleet began to take losses. The human fighters were using the gas clouds as cover, appearing just long enough to fire their weapons before vanishing again. But worse than the attacks themselves was the realization that the humans were toying with them. Deploy the main battle line, he ordered. Crush these insects. The massive alien ships moved into formation, their weapons charging to full power. But as they prepared to fire, the nebula around them began to change. The gas clouds started to glow with an eerie light, and space itself seemed to ripple like water. Captain Minho watched from his position at the edge of the nebula as the alien fleet fell into the trap. The humans had not just hidden ships in the gas clouds, they had turned the entire region into a weapon. Gravitational generators hidden throughout the nebula began to activate, creating fields of distorted spacetime that crushed enemy vessels like tin cans. Sir, reported his science officer, the gravity wells are functioning perfectly. The alien fleet is trapped. Minho nodded grimly. The aliens had walked into a carefully prepared killing ground, thinking they were hunting helpless prey. Instead, they had become the prey themselves. All ships commence final phase, he ordered. From every direction, the true human fleet emerged from hyperspace, not the few thousand ships the aliens had detected, but tens of thousands of vessels, each one more advanced than anything the galaxy had ever seen, ships that could manipulate time and space, weapons that rewrote the laws of physics, soldiers who fought like living gods. The Battle of Kepler Nebula lasted 18 hours. When it was over, the greatest military fleet in galactic history had been reduced to scattered debris and fleeing survivors. The aliens who had come to crush humanity limped home with less than a tenth of their original numbers. But the terrifying part was not the defeat itself. It was the message that Admiral Hygen broadcast to every corner of the galaxy. You have seen what happens when you threaten us. This is your only warning. Leave us in peace, or face the consequences. The galaxy that had dismissed humanity as primitive and weak now trembled at the mention of their name. Story description. This section shows the galaxy's panicked response to humanity's devastating victory over the Quillen. The major alien powers unite to form the largest fleet in galactic history, believing their combined might can crush the upstart humans. However, humanity's true preparations are revealed as hidden shipyards, massive weapons platforms, and tens of thousands of secret warships emerge. The aliens walk into a carefully prepared trap at the Kepler Nebula, where humanity demonstrates even more impossible technologies, including dimensional phasing, gravity manipulation, and space-time distortion. The complete destruction of the Galactic Armada sends shockwaves across the galaxy and establishes humanity as the new apex predator. 1 year after the Battle of Kepler Nebula, the galaxy had settled into its new reality. The great communication networks that had once buzzed with constant chatter now carried careful, measured conversations. Every message was reviewed, every transmission analyzed. The species across the galaxy struggled to understand the new rules of existence in the rebuilt council chambers. A new chair sat at the head of the great circular table. It was made of simple earth steel, unadorned and practical. In sharp contrast to the elaborate crystal and energy constructs that surrounded it, Ambassador Jinwoo sat in that chair now, but his title had changed. He was no longer just an ambassador. He was the Galactic Coordinator, the first human to hold the highest position in Council history. The morning session began as all sessions did now, with a moment of silence. It was not planned or official, but it had become tradition. Everyone in the chamber understood what that silence represented. It was a reminder of what happened to those who mistook human patience for weakness. The agenda today includes trade, route security, colonial development rights, and the petition from the Zilani Confederation for protected status, Jinwoo announced. His voice was calm and professional, but every being in the chamber hung on his words. Representative Kick Star of the Unified Worlds raised a trembling appendage. Coordinator Jinwoo, the Zilani have requested specific protection against Vorthok. Expansion. How should we proceed? Jinwoo considered the question carefully. The Vorthok had been testing boundaries for months, making small moves against weaker species to see how humanity would respond. It was time to make their position clear. The Terran hegemony extends its protection to all council members who request it, he said simply. The Zilani Confederation will be granted full defensive guarantees. Any aggression against their worlds will be considered an act of aggression against humanity. The crystal form of Vorthok, Representative Lex Thera, flickered with what might have been anger, but she said nothing. Everyone in the chamber understood the message. The Vorthok could expand their territory, but only into unclaimed space. The days of taking worlds from weaker species were over. On the outer rim world of New Busan, Captain Dungman walked through the central plaza of the colony that had been evacuated just over a year ago. Children played in the streets while there. Parents worked in shops and offices that bustled with activity. But the changes were obvious to anyone who looked carefully. The defensive platforms that surrounded the world no longer pretended to be industrial facilities. They hung in orbit like metal moons, their weapons arrays visible to any ship that approached the system. The message was clear. This world was under human protection, and any threat would be met with overwhelming force. Sir called his aide. As she approached across the plaza, "We've received the quarterly report from Earth Command." Dongman read the report with satisfaction. Across human space, similar scenes were playing out. Colonies that had been abandoned were now thriving centers of trade and industry. Worlds that had been considered worthless backwaters were revealed to be strategic. Strongholds in humanity's defensive network. But perhaps most importantly, dozens of alien species had requested permission to establish settlements in human territory. The protection of the Terran hegemony had become the most valuable commodity in the galaxy. "Any word from the Quillen territories?" he asked. "Still maintaining complete isolation, sir? Our long-range sensors detect massive construction projects, but they're not responding to any diplomatic overtures." Dongmin nodded. The Quillen were building defenses, preparing for a war that would never come. They had not yet understood that humanity had no interest in conquering their worlds. The Outer Rim provided everything that Earth's children needed. In the deep space between stars, Admiral Hygiene commanded the patrol fleet that had become the galaxy's most feared military force. Her ships moved through the void like silent ghosts, their presence felt rather than seen. Every species in the galaxy knew that the human fleet was out there, watching and waiting. "Ma'am," reported her intelligence officer, "we're detecting unusual activity in the Nexari home system. Large energy buildups that don't match their normal patterns." Hygen studied the readings with professional interest. The Nexari were energy beings, capable of feats that other species could barely imagine. But they had also learned to fear humanity's impossible technology. Analysis. It appears to be some kind of defensive preparation. They're consolidating their energy forms around their core worlds. Hygen almost felt sorry for them. Like all the other alien species, we're still thinking in terms of conventional warfare. They were building defenses against weapons and tactics they understood, not realizing that humanity fought wars in ways that made such preparations meaningless. Send them a message, she decided. Tell them that the Terran hegemony has no hostile intentions toward their territory. As long as they maintain peaceful relations with human worlds and council members under our protection, they have nothing to fear from us. It was the same message humanity had been sending across the galaxy for months, but few species seemed able to believe it. They could not understand a civilization that had the power to conquer everything, but chose not to use it. President Sujin stood in her office on Earth, looking out at the blue sky that had remained unchanged despite everything that had happened. The planet that had once been considered a primitive backwater was now the capital of the most powerful civilization in galactic history. The latest reports, Madam President, her chief of staff said as he entered with a datapad. Sujin read through the updates from across human space. Trade was flourishing as alien species competed for access to human technology. Scientific cooperation had increased dramatically as researchers sought to understand the principles behind humanity's impossible weapons. And most importantly, the galaxy was at peace for the first time in millions of years. Any problems? Minor territorial disputes between some of the smaller species, but nothing that requires our direct intervention. The threat of losing human protection has been remarkably effective at encouraging diplomatic solutions. Sujin smiled. Humanity had achieved something that the great alien empires with all their ancient wisdom had never managed. They had brought peace to the galaxy, not through conquest or diplomacy, but through the simple understanding that some powers were too dangerous to challenge, and our long-term projections. All models suggest continued stability. The alien species are adapting to the new reality faster than expected. Fear is giving way to respect, and respect is becoming acceptance. In the years that followed, historians would struggle to explain how a species that had been in space for only 3 centuries and had managed to reshape galactic civilization so completely. The answer was simpler than most wanted to admit. Humanity had succeeded because they had done something that no other species in galactic history had managed. They had turned their greatest weakness into their greatest strength. Being alone and surrounded by potential enemies had not made them weak. It had made them paranoid, careful, and ultimately unstoppable, while the great alien empires had grown comfortable with their ancient technologies and established power structures. Humanity had been driven by existential fear to push the boundaries of what was possible. They had built weapons that rewrote the laws of physics, developed tactics that seemed like magic, and created a military force that could destroy entire civilizations. But perhaps their greatest achievement was knowing when not to use that power. Ambassador Ginwu concluded his final address to the Galactic Council with words that would be remembered for generations. We offered you friendship, and you chose to see weakness. We offered you partnership, and you chose to see inferiority. We offered you peace, and you chose to see an opportunity for conquest. He paused, letting his words echo through the silent chamber. You forced us to show you what Earth's children become when pushed too far. We did not want to be your rulers. We did not want to be your conquerors. We wanted only to be left alone to build our own destiny among the stars. His gaze swept across the assembled representatives, aliens who had once dismissed humanity as primitive and weak. You would not allow that. So now you will live with the consequences of your choice. You will live in a galaxy where the sound of human footsteps brings silence, where the sight of our ships brings fear, where the mention of our name reminds everyone of the price of underestimating those they consider beneath them. The chamber remained silent long after Ginwu had left. The galaxy had learned its lesson, and the lesson was simple. Never again would they make the mistake of judging Earth's children by their appearance rather than their capabilities, in the silence that had fallen upon the galaxy. A new age had begun. An age where humanity stood as the undisputed apex species, not because they had conquered the stars, but because they had proven they could destroy anyone who tried to stop them. And in that silence, the galaxy finally found peace.